Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Okay, there we go. Okay, so so in this photograph, dude, your photos are great. Okay, so half the image is sky with the clouds very low to the ground, right? In the sense that these are high clouds, and yet there's mountain peaks, and the mountain peaks in the background, there's snow on them. The rocks are super craggy, like there's nothing green on them, nothing alive. In the foreground, in this beautiful tan brown color, is light grass, slight shrub, and this one desert chicken that's humongous. What is that?
This guy down here?
Yeah, it's not a desert chicken. I'm just kidding.
I was like, it's a vicuña. It's a vicuña, which is a subspecies of alpaca.
Ah, alpaca. Okay. So a vicuña.
Yeah, Vecuna, I believe.
Okay. How's your Spanish?
My Spanish is not nearly as good as when I was a kid, but
Okay.
it's okay.
Okay. So okay. So put yourself for a second in the listener's imagination, or in my experience as well, in the sense of that I don't know where we're going, and then we started off in Hawaii, went to California, and now we're in this place where vicuñas, I guess, live on hillsides.
Yeah.
What's this all about?
Well, this is a little more than a hillside. This is Chimborazo, the mountain I was telling about before. This is the tallest mountain in, I believe, the Western Hemisphere. It's
Oh, wow.
20-some thousand feet.
Okay.
It's very, up here was, walking was hard to do. And this is one of the few places that the vicuña live. They just roam around this area.
Oh, wow.
And this was in Ecuador. Ecuador holds a really special part of my heart. It was something I wasn't expecting when I got there, because I grew up in Central America and stuff, and so I thought it was going to be very similar to where I was from. It is in a lot of ways, but also there's something very unique and wild about the entire country, and the culture of a lot of the indigenous people who live there, and how much also is very similar with Hawaii as well, was the care for the land and the different social reforms that are trying. They were at the time that we were there, trying to push through and stuff. It was just there's so much going on there, and so much that that aligned itself with the things I care about as well, that I got swept up in it all.
I love that. Okay, so different people, I say to them, pick 4 photos. They pick 4 photos, and some people, it's like they have a very conscious agenda. They're like, this is what I want to talk about, and which isn't to say that you don't, but they're not necessarily photographers. So, but being a kind of a photographer type person, I really respond to visual, compositions, light, all this stuff. And so this lone animal there's another one in the distance, actually. Or maybe 2 other ones, small.
Yeah, if you look real close, you might be able to find probably 2 or 3 way back there.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of space between them. There's no high grasses. They're little shrubs and little grasses. The light is very kind of, in a way, soft and diffuse, and it's the tone of the image is also really beautiful, in the sense of it's these beautiful tans as far as what is earthy in terms of where the animal is. And then there's you. So in that day that you were there, in terms of in your brain, when you're faced with the invitation, bring about 4 photos, and your brain, for whatever, even if it's is there truly random? I don't know. But so you selected this image. So yeah, what else does it mean? If you dig a little bit into its symbolism, what are we learning here?
Yeah, I think the 4 photos that I selected were primarily picked because the emotions that I attached to them when I took them were all very similar. So they're not like the best pictures I have. They're not the best composed, or even there's one later on that's, I think, even slightly blurry. But it's about how I was feeling when I took them, and in this picture in particular, it was like I was seeing something I'd never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
It was something in a place I had never imagined, some place that felt very alien. And I'm always the most comfortable when I'm in a place that is incredibly alien to me. Like I feel the most, maybe not comfortable isn't the word, but the most me. I feel like the most genuine when I'm in a really alien environment.
Okay, like an outsider in a way.
Yeah. And so like that's where I feel very happy. I feel very secure. And the one picture that I felt that way, but was not in a kind of an alien environment, was the one where it was my daughter and my wife.
Okay.
But it still had a very similar feeling
Sure.
when I took it. So,
so what? Like even then, like even that image is of solitude. You know, it's of being in a space where there is this kind of solitude. And so here, like when you're on this hillside, so for those people who are on the metric system, this is about 7,000 meters.
Yeah, something like that. 20,000 feet.
Just under 6,000, between 6 and 7,000 meters. What was there altitude sickness? How long did it take for you to hike up to this place? Like what was the impact on your body to be out there?
It was pretty tough. Luckily there was like a base camp that's not too far from this location where there's a like a ranger and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It took me maybe about what would have taken if I was at sea level would have taken me maybe like an hour. It took me like 4 to get to the spot. But it was really tough. I was chewing on some the coca leaves, the cocaine leaves, because of altitude sickness, which really did help.
Wow.
But yeah, no, it was tough, but it was every step was like I couldn't stop because everything I would see was something different. And if you see that little peak in the background, you can see some snow on the top of it.
Behind it, yeah.
This picture is the very first time I saw the peak because up to this point it was completely covered in clouds. All I could see was the grass. As soon as I saw a little bit of sky open up and I could see the peak in the background, I snapped a picture.
Yeah. So you said that somebody gave you some coca leaves. Were you part of a group? Were you had a guide?
No, it was just my wife and my daughter. My daughter was sleeping in the car because it's so high. You don't want to spend too much time with a young child up that high.
No, of course.
They kind of stayed in the car, and I went on a hike while she was napping and my wife was reading. And so we walked around a little bit, and then I went and kept on going and taking some pictures. Okay.
So I can't help myself. Somebody who goes running or hiking, trail running, trail hiking, is essentially in their own head.
Yeah.
There's a certain solitude in there, right? Mm-hmm. And then, so you go out onto this hill and there's this one human, like Homo sapien, walking around with his little tool, which is a camera or whatever, in his bags and other tools. And he's sort of taking in the landscape, but fundamentally in his own head, in his own self, right? So I'm going to bring this back to your book. So what happened? So you're going through this experience and to a certain extent feeling alienation about the culture that you're surrounded by, where you're like, I'm in this weird landscape where people are just kind of like bringing down books because they can nail the right verse or whatever it is. And I feel really alien here. So why don't you talk about what are your internal drivers because writing a book is totally a solitary thing. Like you have to get a room of your own, nice and quiet, sit.
Sure.
So why don't you talk about what's your relationship to your own solitude?
Yeah. Solitude, is something I've always prized, and valued highly in my life. It's, when I think a lot of it is probably, I come from a family of 4 sisters and then I was the only boy.
Oh, okay.
So there was a lot of time spent playing by myself as a kid just because my sisters, not that they were,
Are you the youngest?
No, I have one sister younger than me.
Okay. So wait, I have to interrupt. I bought a Subway yesterday from Subway. And the guy behind the counter, I'm very friendly. I'm talking to the guy. He's like, he surprisingly knew where Hong Kong was. And he was like, yeah, I just got my passport. I've told my girlfriend, my fiance, we're going to travel. I'm like, oh, good for you. Like, get out. You need to get out. And he was the only boy with other 4 sisters.
Oh, wow.
But he was he was either the youngest or the eldest. I forget that point.
It's tough when you're growing up with, with 4 sisters and they all kind of like form their own little unit, and then there's you.
I treat you as the doll.
Yeah, like you're the doll, or in my case, I was the guinea pig. So like if they found something they wanted to do, but they weren't sure if it was dangerous, they'd have me go and do it first, kind of stuff. Like we watched Mary Poppins and they weren't sure if actually you could float with an umbrella. So they gave me an umbrella and tossed me off the roof, kind of deal.
Well, obviously you made it. So well done.
I made it. So, but you can't float. The umbrella turns inside out. So don't try it, guys.
Of course. Okay. So why don't you, like, in terms of that, if there are switches in your head that go on and off depending on, the circumstance, right? Like, for example, you have a very small, tight knit family. Like, talk about those deeper levels. Like, was writing your book, what's the title again? It
is Youth Group, Coming of Age in the Church of Christian Nationalism.
A very light, easy, party-going title. Dude, that's a very heavy title. So switches in your head in terms of would go off for you to write this book and to publish it, because that's a different task than to actually writing, right? But then to go on hikes. So why don't you connect, or if you can, try to connect growing up, only boy within that whole world. Like, why don't you share that in terms of what are the switches in your brain that go off to make you kind of grab your camera, go out, or...
So, like, I always sought out solitude or sought out adventures that I partook in by myself. So, like, when I went after high school, I knew I didn't want to go to college, mostly just because everybody else was going. And so I was like, I'm not going to do that. Eventually ended up going, but it took me about 10 years. I instead went to Vietnam. I bought a one-way ticket to Vietnam and had a backpack. I got rid of everything that I owned and just had a backpack with a few things in it, and went to Southeast Asia and hiked around, just kind of backpacked through Southeast Asia, the traditional backpacker thing. At the time, I thought I was like completely unique in doing it. Of course, everyone does when they're that age.
Right.
Think they're kind of a unique butterfly in how they do things. But
choosing Vietnam, though, I mean, that's like what drew you to Vietnam?
Vietnam, I think Vietnam, it was its place in American history. Like it's this quagmire that America got itself into, and there's so much. I grew up watching like Chuck Norris movies and Uncommon Valor, like all these movies that featured Vietnam negatively, but something about it, like something about the mystery of like this place that seemingly stood against everything I knew up to that point about like America, like America's invincibility, its exceptionalism, and yet somehow what happened, like Vietnam something about it just didn't stand out, like stood out in a way that didn't make sense to me. Which had always intrigued me, so I picked Vietnam. And
I think sorry, am I interrupting? I don't mean to interrupt.
No, yeah, it was essentially from there. I just I experiencing it alone and going from like group to group of people. There were people who like immediately accepted me in as like a fellow traveler, and that made me I felt very much like I was accepted, as well as feeling the solitude, and it was a great experience for me.
Nice. Well, on that note, shall we go on to the next photo?
Let's do it.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.